Say what year. I'd like to call to order the January 30th, 2012 City Council work session. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and Invocation? Yes, this is something new.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we lift up to you today the city of Goodyear, its people, businesses, lands, and wildlife. We ask boldly for your blessing of health, prosperity, jobs, and happiness. Bless us so that we may be a blessing to this state and people. Carefully protect all who serve their fellow man and guard those lives that fight for our freedoms. Thank you for the quick healing of our Mayor, Lord. In your mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, as for roll call, I know that Ms. Loretano is on her way and will be joining us via telephone shortly. We do not need to have a motion for attendance. Okay. So, first item on our agenda this evening, Council will receive an update from Macerich regarding the development schedule for the Estrella Falls Regional Mall, Brian Dahlke, and I'd also like to welcome Garrett Newland with Westcor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. You said it well. This is an opportunity for Mr. Newland to provide an update to Council and to be able to answer questions as far as the development processes, the timelines associated with the development of the Estrella Falls Regional Mall. Garrett Newland is representing Macerich, formerly known as Westcor. He's the Vice President of Development, and he will be spending most of the time, and certainly staff is here to answer questions as they come up as well. So with that, I turn it over to Garrett Newland.
Thank you, Brian. And Vice Mayor, Council, thanks for having me out today. Want to send well wishes to Mayor Lord. I understand that she's been under the weather, and hope she's doing well.
Thank you.
An update on the Regional Mall project. We had hoped to be able to come and speak to you this quarter, first quarter of 2012, with news that we would be able to enter the site plan process and then develop and build the mall for a 2014 fall opening. Unfortunately, we are not able to do that at this time. A number of reasons for that. I'll talk about that a little bit, and of course, please ask any questions that you have. Happy to answer them. The first comment I would make is that, with Westcor and Macerich, we've been developing projects in Phoenix for a long time. We've been here for over 40 years. We've developed, I think, a lot of great retail projects, and the reality is it's a challenging process, to say the least. There's certainly not much of a science to it. It's much more of an art. The development and construction phase of the project is anywhere from 2 to 3 years, and you have to have all of your retailer commitments, financing established, et cetera, at the beginning of that 2 to 3 years before you're able to pull the trigger and go. The economy, unfortunately, continues to be the problem. The good news for us is that our sales are improving. Our Arizona portfolio dropped, depends on the property, but on average between 15 and 20% during the economic downturn between 2008 and 2010. The good news is that we're coming back, and our portfolio is seeing growth again. Our existing malls, we're seeing growth in the 4 to 5% range, but that's a lot of time to still make up what we lost during the downturn. The other thing to point out, I guess, is that Goodyear will be the main retail hub for the Southwest Valley. Estrella Falls will be that. It's just a matter of timing. Our major retailers are telling us that there's no question about the location, that is the right place for this to take place. However, timing-wise, for them to commit, in some cases millions of dollars in a new ground-up mall in and I'll say Greater Phoenix. It's not just Goodyear, it's Greater Phoenix. To do a ground-up project anywhere in this market is going to be a challenge, at least for a period of time. Our CEO, Art Coppola, came out last week to Phoenix, and he spoke before a ULI conference. And they specifically asked him about Astoria Falls and Goodyear. He made the comment that he is, and the board is, still very bullish about Arizona, about the Southwest Valley, and about Goodyear specifically, and about Astoria Falls. But that Wall Street and retail is still looking at Arizona with less than perfect eyes. And they're going to need to continue to see retail growth before they're going to be able to be ready to commit to a new project in Phoenix. I think we all know that we still have a lot of vacant retail space, not just in Goodyear. Certainly there is in Goodyear, but the West Valley and then all over Phoenix. A lot of that still has to get worked through before you start getting healthy in terms of vacancy and occupancy rates for retail projects. This is not necessarily unusual. Westcor, over 40 years here, I can point to several projects that original timing came out, and then due to economic conditions, the projects had to get delayed. Ones that this council might be the most familiar with might be Arrowhead Town Center. We came out with an initial announcement of opening in 1990. We didn't open that mall until 93. And it's just, as I mentioned, it is a challenge to pull everyone together and stay on that timing, given economic conditions at the time. Another example, one that I'm more familiar with, is Chandler Fashion Center. Westcor entered into the partnership with the Probster family in 1986 and announced timing for the mall in 1996. Well, the mall didn't open until 2001, and again, it was the economic uncertainties in the 90s that created that delay. So there's not unusual at all. I will also say that no one wants to open this mall more than we do, believe me. We have already committed.
Oh, no, I think we do.
Well, that may be.
We might be tied.
We've invested many tens of millions of dollars already in Goodyear, in land, and in building a first phase of a power center. We continue to invest ongoing every year in improvement district assessments that built all of the infrastructure that will allow the mall to open when we are able to build it. And our commitment has not faltered and will not falter. We are on track, and we'll build the mall when the economy allows us to do it. I don't think that anyone would want us to go out and build a project that wasn't ready to open. And we can look around this valley and all around the country and see some projects that got built that shouldn't have gotten built. And the stigma that comes along with not being able to be successful right from the start is significant. So we will build it. We are in good shape as a corporate entity. Very good cash position as a company. We just need the economy to improve enough to allow retailers to invest and come to Goodyear. So with that, I'll happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anyone like to start? Joe?
I'll start. Is this coming through?
Yeah.
What are the main concerns of the anchors at this time? I know the demographics of retail, and I know Goodyear itself over the last few years. I mean, our unemployment's below average. Last time I checked was about 6%. We're like fourth in building permits. Our revenues are in the plus. They're growing. Our vacancy rates are dropping significantly. Last thing I think I checked, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're in the 15-16% on commercial from 25. Our industrial is gone. So everything's moving in the right direction here. I'm hearing all the time from constituents they need a place to shop in the Southwest Valley. And what is the concerns of the anchors? Is it the financing? Is Wall Street not giving them the money? I mean, what's it going to take to get this thing started?
Yeah, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Pizzillo, as I mentioned, the economy. I mean, I think we all look at some of the indicators and see that unemployment is getting better. We see that the retail vacancy is improving. Even a 15 to 16% vacancy rate, though, is way too high. I mean, across our portfolio, we average 6 to 7%. So that's still double what a healthy vacancy rate would be. And it's not just the anchors; it's anchors and retailers, shop retailers as well, that in order to place another store and invest in another store, lending side of it is certainly part of it. Access to capital is not the way it was in the middle 2000s. It's much more challenging to do that, and it's a matter of a sales forecast. That's how the retailers come up with when they can open a store and how much they can pay in cost of occupancy. When they look at really anywhere in Phoenix for a brand new store, not a repositioned store, but a brand new store in a new project, they run their numbers, and their numbers are not telling them that they can pay a rent that will justify a new location. It's getting better, as you mentioned. It's definitely getting better, and we believe that we will be able to open it in the next few years, but just not 2014 is just the timing of that hasn't worked out.
Is there any possibility on some of the outlying of the mall itself, like the theater and a couple others, opening ahead of time to fill some of those voids we have out here in the community?
I wouldn't rule that out necessarily. However, most of the retailers that we want to try to attract are looking to the mall. They're looking to the mall and saying, once the mall is there, that's when we're going to want to be there. Until then, there are a lot of other opportunities for vacant space in Goodyear and otherwise that they could go locate in for temporary until the mall gets there. So most of that development, and that's been the model for how Westcor is built overall all the years in Phoenix, is once the regional mall comes, all of that peripheral property, the additional retail, office, hotel development is generated by that core, that synergy that's created by the main mall.
And you talk about synergy. My concern is a lot of the businesses I talk to around the area where the mall's going to go in, they ask me all the time, when's the mall coming? When's the mall coming? Because they're counting on that synergy of the mall to help their business as well that's around there. Whether it's your power center that's right off of Pebble Creek, or some of the restaurants are right off of McDowell. So I'm sure they're interested in trying to get that synergy going as well, too. So.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, thank you for being here tonight. I guess hearing it right from the horse's mouth is better than hearing it from the other end. Sorry.
No comment.
Anyway, the next benchmark for the development agreement is in 2016. So it's a 2-year push. Do you have a feel for 2016?
Well, in particular on this project, I think hindsight's always 20/20. I personally have stood up and said that we think the date is X, and then it turns out because of what we've seen, it's been Y. And so I'm not comfortable with putting a date out there, but you said it, our development agreement has a provision that goes to 2016, and I'm confident that we're going to open before that. Whether that means 15 or 16, I can't say, but before 16, yes.
Okay, so, and that was really what I was driving is.
Yeah.
Where are we at with that? The second question that I have,
They're calling in for Sherry.
I think, is for the attorney. You want me to wait? That's right.
You know she'll want to hear this.
Hello, this is Sherry.
Okay. Hi, Sherry. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, Bill's asking questions right now, and Mr. Newland just gave a presentation about Westcor.
The question is for Rourke or Mr. Fishbach. My big concern, and I realize that Matriarch is a very healthy corporate company. However, we've seen a lot of very healthy corporations filed bankruptcy in the last 5 years. In the event that that were to happen here, are we secured, or are we looking at another Mobile?
Look at page 2 of the material I handed out this evening. At the bottom of the page, it says what happens
Yep.
if Westport Macerich defaults. I think that explains it.
There is the bullet that says, assuming there is no bankruptcy court involved. So, so we don't have any protection if they file bankruptcy, other than going through, we'll be a creditor.
On, in the bankruptcy estate, but that's going to complicate matters. I mean, typically, when you have default, the city steps in and forecloses on the property and takes hold of the assessment payments, because this is contingent liability on an improvement district. So we are backstopping Westport. But so far, they've made their payments every year. So they certainly have an investment in the community.
Sorry, Rourke, just a moment. Sherry, do you have a mute button?
Yeah, let me get that.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, Rourke.
You're asking me if I had a mute button.
I said Sherry.
If the lawyers talk long enough,
And I'm certainly not implying anything, and I don't want to be on record as that, but I'm absolutely looking for us to be in a position of security. A lot of times when we make large capital purchases, we'll put a bond in place that protects us from from financial liability. Obviously, we don't have anything like that, and we didn't have it with Montage development. Is that an option? Is that something that's even available to us as a insurance policy, quote unquote?
well, in an improvement district scheme, your security is the underlying asset, which is the land. So the security for the city is in the effective default by the assessed property, the city steps in and takes that property. So it's just the underlying value of the land.
Just hung up in bankruptcy court.
That would be the complicated factor.
Okay.
That would presume, except they receive a large company or business combination.
Yeah, it presumes a lot of things. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
I have some. Oh, go ahead, Molly.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you for coming tonight for a number of reasons. I know you're aware that this council receives almost weekly emails from our residents asking for an update of the mall, and we've not been able to really give them one. When I inadvertently said we hope to see some movement by the end of the year and nothing happened, I've already been tarred and feathered because I misspoke. But what I'm concerned about is you've also got the Posada Mall going at the same time. Do you plan on finishing it before you do our Estrella Mall?
Yeah, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Campbell, the Posada project, which is in Surprise, we do have a regional mall site that's set aside there, but we've publicly stated every time, and let me put it on the record again today, that that mall is years and years after Goodyear. That market will not be ready for a regional mall until the Goodyear project, Estrella Falls, is built and stabilized. And it's, you can take comfort in that it's not just me saying that, it's numbers, it's population, it's income, it's all those things. The growth curve is much further ahead in Goodyear than it is in Surprise today. Surprise is that project is going to be a great project when it's ready, but you'll see power center development happen before the mall there, and no, the regional mall, the next regional mall to be built in Phoenix is Estrella Falls, absolutely.
Okay. My next question is, I know you're very familiar with that property out there. You've seen where that regional mall is going to be in Surprise.
Oh, yes.
And I'm assuming the sign that there is not your sign, but possibly the city's sign that says Posada Regional Mall coming, and it actually identifies one or two anchors.
Mm-hmm.
So who owns that sign? Who put that sign up?
Vice Mayor, Council Member, I'm quite certain that that's our sign.
Okay,
I'm quite certain it's a Mace Ridge West Core sign.
why don't we have one?
That's a great
If we had a
question.
sign in that vacant lot and people drive by, it might remind them that it's not built yet, but it would make them think it's been identified and people know that's where the mall is coming. And I think really it might give some measure of comfort to know that that's just not an abandoned piece of property, which is what it looks like now. I mean, there's no differentiation of anything in that mall other than, or where the mall is going, except for these lights that don't work, or they're flashing, and driveways that go nowhere.
Well, Vice
So
Mayor,
could we ask you,
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Campbell,
Please.
yes.
Thank you.
I would be happy to talk to staff and work with staff on some temporary signage for the
Perfect,
property.
wonderful.
That would help. We'd be happy to do that.
What do you think, City Manager? Do you think that's a good idea?
Yes, last.
It's not on.
Thank you. Yes, last time,
It's not on either, is it?
I think it was going.
hello?
You want mine?
Hello? Madam Vice Mayor, Councilmember Campbell. Yes, I think that's a great idea, and when we checked into it last time, there were some difficulties with it, but and you and I had talked about it, but I think it's a fantastic idea, and certainly we'll follow up on it.
Thank you very much. And my last comment, I do want to thank you for coming, Garrett. It's important, not only to council to see you face to face, but for our residents to hear from you. And I sincerely encourage you to come back to us 6 months or so and give us an update, just so that we know it's still on your fast burner, even though you can't do anything right now. And that way we can assure our residents that we have every intention of supporting you and your company in building the best mall that the West Valley will ever have. And thank you.
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Campbell. We also get a lot of response from your citizens, and some of them are positive and some are not so positive, but it's understandable. And again, the project that I'm most familiar with in Chandler, it was the same thing. I was working in the city at that time, and they, when is the project going to come? Why can't you start it today? Well, and same case here. It's you've got to have those commitments and in place at the right time. But I'd be happy to come as often as your council would like me to come and give an update. I'd be happy to.
Well, I have a few questions. Some of it has already been kind of hit upon, but I wrote these out, and I want to make sure that I hit them all. And first of all, Mr. Newland, you're our partner. We stand still with you. That doesn't change. My feelings, though, have become guarded. I'll be honest with you. And I've kind of gone into defense mode. I have to think about the city. I know we all are. And I was teasing you about earlier throwing some football jargon at you because Super Bowl's this weekend. But truly, the city's played offense the last few years. We've gone after goal after goal after goal, and we have been stuck holding the football quite often with no one to receive it. And I would have to say right now, I feel like there's a flag on the play, and we're at stopping point. So I want to start off with, have you gone looking for other anchors? Are the anchors the problem? Are your anchors that you've chosen not financially stable? Point blank.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. The anchors are stable. The anchors of Dillard's and Macy's are both very viable companies. As far as replacement tenants, the world has changed a lot in the last 10 years when it comes to department stores. A lot of the department stores, when Chandler Fashion Center, we came forward to build that project, we had 8 different department stores that were vying for 4 anchor positions. Today, that number is really down to only a handful of anchors that could that could really come and anchor a project. And even more so than in a power center or in a neighborhood center, the kinds of anchors that you bring really point to the kinds of other tenants that you can get. And a Dillard's and a Macy's bring that fashion that we need to sell to our women's fashion primarily, juniors, teens, children's. Dillard's and Macy's are really critical components of being able to sell to that.
On that. There's always Nordstrom's out there.
And Nordstrom will likely locate somewhere in the West Valley someday, but they don't have any plans for the foreseeable future. They've got to see sales at their 2 stores here come back to anywhere close to what they were before the downturn, before they're even going to think about a 3rd store, which is understandable. So the answer is, retailers like Mervyn's no longer exist, Robinson's May no longer exists, Lord & Taylor no longer. I mean, there is just a long line of former department stores that are just not out there anymore. So we believe that our partners in Dillard's and Macy's are both strong and viable, and they'll be great anchors for our project here.
Okay. I was reading recently that a new high-end outlet center was, and I could be wrong, maybe 80 retailers. I'm not sure. Maybe that's far too many. But going out towards Chandler or going towards, really, it's not necessarily, we don't want an outlet center is what I'm asking for, but the point is there's retailers ready to move, obviously, if some kind of project like that can happen. So, when I'm seeing that and wondering why ours is still, all these questions are going through my mind. Is there something you can say about that?
Sure, Vice Mayor. The outlet industry has come on strong even through the downturn. Previously, before you would see an outlet mall, typically you'd hit the last department store anchored regional mall, and you'd have to drive 30 to 50 miles. And that's why you saw them land on the outskirts of communities like Anthem and other places. In the last 10 years, and particularly even more so in the last 5 years, that's changed. And retailers are seeing outlet as another vehicle to deliver sales. And so it used to be discounted merchandise, second merchandise, damaged merchandise that you'd find in outlet. Well, now retailers manufacture a product for the outlet store. And so it's a slightly different product. Maybe it doesn't have as many buttons. It's just but it's another way to deliver those kinds of goods to the market. The project you're referring to, I believe, is the one that Simon announced down close to Chandler. Again, I think because of the change in how retailers are viewing things, that's why these outlet malls are looking to come more closely into the market here. We do not want to build an outlet mall in Goodyear, if that's what you're asking.
No, that's not. No, my point was that it's obvious there's retailers out there that are ready to move. That's the point.
And you've seen some outlet malls get built even through this downturn. There have been a few built in the country, and they're performing okay. There have been really no regional malls, full-price, full-line regional malls built over the last few years that were ground-up projects. But you have seen some outlet projects come forward. And as I mentioned, talking to staff previously, the outlet projects that are looking in the West Valley too, there have been a couple. It's just something we have to keep our eye on because it's more square footage in a market that already has a lot of retail square footage built. So it's just something we have to keep our eyes on.
You kind of hit on it that your president was feeling bullish about Goodyear, and obviously I'm the one sitting here at the table that has the retail knowledge of our town and how it goes. But quite frankly, if you look at our sales tax revenues for Goodyear, it continues to be strong. And I hope that we are considered a leader in our state and not that. I hate that they're looking at just the state, because that is, we're kind of a little bit, I don't want to say an anomaly, but you know what, it is fairly special out here. And I think that, if you want to look just at figures, we have it that you can look at, and it is stronger. And so I hope you take that message. I know I send that message to you, but I hope that you let them know. And if they're looking at Arizona in particular, is it just something through the nation? I mean, is it still all of the above? I would imagine the economy.
Vice Mayor, it's all the above. It's Wall Street and the national retailers, and we have a very sophisticated, we have staff, internal staff that are former researchers for retailers that do all of our research. And we have a dynamite package on Astoria Falls. And the reason we chose Astoria Falls was because Goodyear is such an up-and-coming, strong market. That's why we landed here to begin with. But it goes beyond just Goodyear. I mean, this mall will serve, the surrounding area. I mean, we need a primary population of 500,000 people for it to be successful. So it's serving much more than just Goodyear, although Goodyear's the home,
we know that.
and we'll be here. So it's not an easy, it's certainly not an easy topic to walk through. But when you look at the numbers, those retailers that we were talking to when we were going to open the mall earlier, in addition to the existing on-the-ground current population base, you were able to say, and Goodyear, Surprise, Avondale, and Buckeye are 4 of the 10 fastest growing cities in the nation. Well, you can't say that anymore. And all of the negative publicity that Arizona has gotten nationally in the media, the Wall Street Journal, and all the other publications you can imagine, they still focus on that negative article, that one negative article that comes through. We're consistently battling that when we meet with retailers. We have malls all over the country. We're talking to retailers about a mall in New Jersey, and hey, don't forget about Arizona. We're going to have you open with us here. Oh, Arizona's, boy, so it is a constant battle that we're fighting. So, and I know you all
That's
are
so
doing your
sad.
best to help too.
It's your governor.
Well, lastly, a year ago. Oh, go ahead.
Kind of a follow-up to what where you were going with your last question. Has the model, the retail model of a mall, is that still viable? We've been talking about all these changes, and I think the Vice Mayor's question kind of makes that percolate a little bit.
It's a great question. And retail, just like other sectors, office, industrial, anything that gets built, over time it evolves. And the retailers think of regional malls before the 60s, 70s, 80s. It was kind of downtowns and main streets, and then that evolved into these large buildings that had all these retailers inside them. Well, then through the 90s and 2000s, that even evolved to more of the lifestyle centers, the outdoor centers, the projects like Kierland or Biltmore. You saw more of those getting built. So it's a good question. The way we look at it is it's really less about the format of the retail. It's the retailers that you bring. And you put them, whether it's an enclosed building or an outdoor setting or a lifestyle project, the collection of them together with other amenities is how they're successful. So we still see that as very, very viable.
I'm sorry, my last question for you, Garrett. A year ago, we talked about what could we do to give that synergy to the area, have something going on in that Bullard Park, do something. And we did have a nice outdoor, it was a play or something that went on, and it was great. It was highly attended. And I hope that we can continue to brainstorm about ways that we could add some value to the area and help, bring some people to those power centers, make it something that's, quarterly, something that we, get some energy going on over there. I'd really appreciate that.
And Vice Mayor, we completely agree with you, and we were happy to participate in that. We are continuing, actually I signed the contract today for the partnership with the ballpark. We're continuing to be a major sponsor for spring training.
Thank you.
I just have to reiterate that our commitment to Goodyear is strong and continues, and we're going to be here, and we're willing to look at other marketing events, and we definitely want to help drive traffic to the Power Center and to sales in Goodyear. It's good for us too. We're happy to do that.
Okay. I do have some questions for John. Does anybody else have any other questions? I know, John, that you gave us this summary. I appreciate that after this morning's discussion. I have not had a chance to go through it all. So some of these questions you may be able to just say, you know what, they're in here. I would, my concern again, and it's just being on the defense, and knowing that, we've had 3 major projects that, like I said, that have hurt us, and we obviously don't want a 4th. And so I look at what are exit strategies, or what are strategies that, if we had to, step up to the plate, what the future would be. And some of my questions are, Garrett said the corporation is solid financially. Have we looked at their financial stability ourselves? I would like bullet points laid out as to what we are currently paying besides the 50% sales tax reimbursement for the power center. Maybe that's the only item.
That is the only item.
That is the only item. If for whatever reason Mace Rich defaults, bullet points as to how we are tied to this financially and what the cost would be, and you may have outlined some of that. Is the flashing yellow traffic signal on McDowell ours? Can it be used for another critical intersection? If not, can we turn it off? Or would it make it worse by being unused, kind of like we always say with a watch that you don't keep a battery in? If it's not running, it makes the engine worse.
Those are all addressed in here.
It's all addressed in there. Okay. Can it be moved?
No,
it cannot
because
be moved.
it's an asset of the improvement
The
district.
improvement district. And lastly, Joe and I know we've said this in the past, when we're going through budget discussions, I don't want to see that on the revenue line in the future. It's, until I see framework, I really am not going to consider it myself. That's kind of where I'm sitting.
Understood.
Thank you. Joe?
Just real quick for Mr. Nolan. Listen, even though I am very disappointed in the news, I do appreciate you coming here and talking to us, because it's real important that we get these updates regularly to our constituents. I don't know how many times a day, I'm sure the vice mayor and everybody else on here, people come up and ask us what the status of the mall is. I mean, we've got people writing us or asking us or even putting stuff out there in the newspaper regarding it. So really it's appreciative of hearing it right from the source, so we know, what's kind of going on there. Second thing is again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we have a lot of demographics in our economic development department who work very hard to try to encourage those people to locate here, because, I still feel Goodyear is uniquely, when the demographics, the disposable income's high, we're comparable over to Scottsdale, and I'm sure you have all of that information. But if there's anything that our ED people can help to sway, convince the retailers, the Wall Streeters, that Goodyear is not necessarily, Phoenix is not necessarily the rest of the state of the news that you hear coming across the national airwaves. All right, and I realize bad news sometimes attaches to everyone in all the cities, but I think we're unique on a lot of things that we're doing here and moving forward. And if you need any help, you see if there's something with the staff or whatever can kind of push some of those demographics, because even though being disappointed, I still believe that you're going to see this is the place where it's going to be taking off one way or the other for the surrounding areas that we all support. So, and again, I do appreciate you coming. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and Councilmember Pizzillo. Just a quick comment on staff. Your staff is fantastic, by the way. We had our entire leasing team on a bus with your staff this past, I want to say summer, because our bus broke down. And
in the summer.
And
nice.
it was great, yes. But no, we had our entire leasing team out, and we did a full tour of residential, employment, commercial, and again, we're sold. We are definitely sold. It's taking that message back to the retailers and getting sales to improve enough to make it happen. So thank you.
We'll have that touchdown soon. Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Newland, are you responsible for all of the leasing on that property at McDowell and Double Creek Parkway, the power center?
Yes, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Stipp. My company is, yes. We're responsible for the power center and for the mall site, as well as all the surrounding commercial that will eventually get built there.
Okay,
yes.
well, here's a kudos for you. I know several of the business owners in that area have been extremely happy with the ability to renegotiate leases and be able to keep their businesses in operation in that area, and that is it's not happening everywhere. So we've got a lot of vacancies, but I appreciate you working hard to keep our mom, as I say, our mom and pops open. I think that's all. And I don't mean to look at you for mom and pop, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
It's critical for us to keep retailers in business right now. So we're agree.
Well, you're a good partner. Thank you very much. We'll keep working on it and hopefully have better news next time you're here.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, Council. We're committed. We'll be here.
Thanks. We're here with you too.
Just a reminder to make sure everybody speaks into their mic. I was given a little note about it, okay? Next on our agenda, item B, discuss with council the proposed replacement of Chapter 21 of the alarm systems of the Goodyear City Code in its entirety. Lieutenant Jeff Rogers will give our presentation.
Good evening, Vice Mayor, Council, City Management. Tonight we want to talk about what we're going to do as far as moving forward with the alarm process and program in our city, specifically as it relates directly to the police department. I put together a brief PowerPoint presentation that will hopefully guide us through it, but please, if you have any questions, let me know. The background on this is the fact of the matter, we have to respond to alarm calls for service in our city. It's been the direction of council, city management, and staff that the police department will respond, and we're not going to take an opportunity or present an opportunity for us to not respond. Although the data suggests that there is a high false alarm rate in our city and nationally, we're not talking about the patrol response, but we're talking about what do we do about the problem. As you can see, we had in fiscal year 96-97, 793 false alarm calls for service. As the population grew, it continued to grow in our city. Last year, we had 2,781 false alarm calls for service. The rate in our city is staying right around 99% false alarms. So all of those calls that are coming in from residents and businesses to the alarm business monitoring centers being called to our Goodyear Police Department, our officers are being dispatched to these calls for service at a known rate of 99% false, and it's not getting any better. The current ordinance that's in place right now, it has not reduced false alarm calls for service, nor has it improved the false alarm rate. So not only is the rate staying, but the call for service volume is also increasing. Probably the best way to look at the alarm problem is to break it down into just two halves. You have the administrative function of what we do, and then the patrol response out there. The administrative function basically dealing with the initial permits, permit renewals, false alarm notifications, and then the data tracking, fines and fee assessment. That was done with an alarm coordinator in the past. That position has since been vacated May of 2009. The other half of the house is the patrol response. Again, the Goodyear Police Department remains committed to responding to all calls for service because we know that it's important. But we do need to look at being responsible with the officer time, the dispatch time, and not to mention the decreased available time for other calls. If an officer is at a false alarm or an alarm call for service, they can't obviously be in two places at one time. Breaking down the patrol response a little bit more, the general alarm calls, and it's very important to distinguish the difference between general alarm or burglary alarm calls versus panic or hold-up alarm calls. The general alarm calls, as they stand right now, are a two-officer response in our city. The average response time last year was under 7 minutes. The national average response time is 20 minutes, and this is data from the International Associations of Chiefs of Police and the National Sheriff's Association. They have put together this data, so obviously the Goodyear Police Department is doing a great job. We're almost a third of the time responding from the national average, and that's just on a general alarm call for service. Then we have our panic and hold-up alarm calls. That dictates a mass patrol response. We're assuming at that point that something is seriously wrong, someone is being held against their will, or a robbery is in progress, versus a general alarm call, which is dedicated or designed not to capture the criminals, but to disrupt and displace and to notify us after the fact, because we know that the average alarm call or the average burglar nationally takes 5 minutes approximately to get into the home or business and get out, knowing that the response time is typically 20 minutes across the nation or 7 minutes in Goodyear. That's where we're missing. And that can't be improved. It's the nature of the beast. So again, now we have the general alarms and the panic hold-up alarms, and then what I did is that we broke it down a little bit as far as what is it costing us to respond to these calls in our city. Last year, it was estimated that $53,000, almost $54,000 is what it was costing to send officers to this call for service, and this included our officer time, our dispatch time, and the cost recovery for the vehicles that we're operating. The administrative function, yes, sir.
How many, out of a typical day, that when you look at a typical day that a patrol officer is doing patrol, how much time are they spending on false alarms or general alarm calls?
Yes, sir. Vice Mayor and Councilmember Gelser, we broke it down on the different types of calls for service, and approximately 30 minutes from dispatch time to completion time is what it's taking on the average call. 15 minutes on the burglary, 30 minutes on the panic hold-up alarm.
Okay.
So multiplying that out at the 2,700 calls for service we had last year, I could certainly get that math to you.
No,
later.
that's fine. That's fine.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Moving on, as far as the administrative function, it's at face value. I don't want to read that slide to you, but basically this involves the permitting, the alarm business permits, and the residential and business permits, the notifications, the fines and fees, and then I also put up there some information about the alarm coordinator position that was frozen in May and removed. Something that's important up there is the salary and related expenses for that alarm coordinator was $87,975. Last year, the revenues from the ordinance itself, $41,000, and with just those numbers up there, we're running at a loss if we were to continue on with that full-time employee on the administrative function. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. So we know we have a problem. We know that we can't change the rate of false alarms. That's something that's out of our span of control. What is it that we can do? And a lot of research was done nationally post 9/11. There was a commission put together by the International Associations of Chiefs of Police. They wanted to figure out, working with the alarm businesses, how do we fix this problem? One of the biggest things that you'll see out there is most alarm ordinances, they're assessing fines and fees to the end users, the business owner and the resident. And they're trying to do that to teach them, all right, if you make this mistake, we're going to continue to fine and fee you. National studies show that the imposition of the fines have little to no effect, and so does our data. So Goodyear is no different than anywhere else in the country. Imposing these fines and fees is not fixing the problem, clearly. Also, the same study done by the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and National Sheriff's Association found that the problem is directly related to user error. They estimate that 75% of the false alarms are being generated by the user who's at the home at that time. So the question that comes to play is, if that person is at home and they're the problem, why can't we just call in and ask them, are you okay, is everything okay? And they cancel us and let us know, or they cancel the alarm business. Basically, the problem historically dealt with call waiting. As that alarm line was dialing out to the alarm monitoring center was calling in, and it was just ringing and ringing and ringing. That was the big problem. They found, just by adding a second call into the same line of service, it dropped the rate 25%. So making that second call was a huge finding in the research nationally, that just adding that second call in was a good thing, and it was going to decrease it. Now, move forward with the advent of technology, a lot of homeowners don't even have landlines anymore, or they have cell phones or multiple cell phones. With the inclusion of cell phones, the increased contact of responsible parties improved by an additional 60%. So now we have national data that says we can really start to attack the problem here. This assessing fines and fees to the end user wasn't fixing anything, and it isn't nationally. However, adding just a second call in was decreasing the amount of calls dramatically. And this was the inception of what we call enhanced call verification. And basically what it is it's putting in that second call to the responsible party. Those of you who have alarms at your home, you typically fill out paperwork. You would continue to fill out that paperwork with the alarm monitoring company, put down your first contact, your second contact, et cetera, and different phone numbers. Enhanced call verification would just put the onus on the alarm monitoring company to make one more call if initial contact wasn't made. Something that we found interesting was that second call for enhanced call verification only adds 30 seconds to the process. Again, if you go back to the data that we had before, our 7-minute response time plus the 30 seconds is still phenomenal. What's very important to understand is enhanced call verification, that second phone call, does not apply to panic or hold-up alarms. So again, we're attacking the one that we know is 99.7% false in our city, looking at that problem and trying to improve the rate and the overall volume of calls for service. It does not affect panic or hold-up alarms.
Could you give anecdotal evidence of dealing with alarm companies and talking about having them actually doing enhanced call verification, and what has Goodyear PD, what have you gotten back from the alarm companies?
Yes, sir. Vice Mayor and Councilmember Gelser, we actually stepped out of the box on this one, and we met with the Arizona Alarm Association. There's a very large lobby group that has a vested interest in this concept as far as how is it run. We met with the Arizona Alarm Association and worked hand in hand with them. They actually provided us a lot of the nationwide studies and research that I've cited in this presentation to you. They are on board with it. They suggest it. And also the International Association of Chiefs of Police is moving towards making it a mandate, as well as the Association of Police Communications. They're looking at making enhanced call verification, or ECV, a standard in the industry. Everyone understands the research behind it, and there seems to be no argument or fight behind it, or against it, rather, sir.
Have we instituted that, or does the new ordinance put in ECV as a requirement of having an alarm or doing business with an alarm company?
Yes, sir. I see the question. Vice Mayor and Councilmember Gelser, we have not implemented it yet because our current ordinance does not allow us to. The adoption of this new ordinance would implement enhanced call verification.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. The recommendation that we have at this point from the police department is, again, looking at this from two sides, the patrol side and the administrative side. On the patrol side, we continue to respond to all alarm calls for service. It's important to all of our citizens, council, city management, and the police department that we don't present any opportunity in us not responding to alarm calls for service. We would suggest or recommend that we move to enhanced call verification. Again, this would be for general alarms only, would not affect panic or hold-up alarms. This would eliminate the bulk of the administrative functions. This would basically be a removal of residential and building, or not building permits, that's a typo on my part, but residential and business permits, alarm businesses in our city. There would still be permitting, obviously, for the alarm companies performing business in the city through business permitting, but we're talking about the police alarm permits. This would also eliminate the false alarm notices and tracking that the patrol officers are responsible for doing right now. And that actually speaks directly, sir, at what you were asking before, is some of the time that we have to take as officers responding is calling back into our telecom center and getting information from them that sometimes isn't readily available because it's not been provided by the alarm companies to us. So we're looking at, again, the removal of that component as well, shifting all of that administrative function onto the alarm businesses through the code. And as you can see, the violations, we still have civil or criminal sanctions that we can impose for those businesses that don't. But what we're doing is we're looking at this holistically, trying to figure out the cause of the problem. How do we prevent it? We feel that we've got solid research behind us at the national level and local level that supports it as well. We think we've got a great solution. And now we're going to the new ordinance that we're looking at, or the proposed ordinance is looking at fixing that problem and then cleaning up some language as well to simple things like requiring that all employees of the alarm companies wear photo identification when they conduct business in our city. There are some officer safety components in there as well, as far as gathering information about are there guns on site, are there dogs on site, things that are very important for those of us who respond to those locations. So that's an overview of what we're looking at. Are there any questions?
I've always felt fining him wasn't going to work. I mean, we knew that historically. Got to figure out a way to reduce the false alarms, whether
That's
it's
right.
education, training, et cetera. And I appreciate, trying this to see if it works. But I guess the question I have is on the penalties. You say you could still pursue civil penalties. Are we looking at a cite after maybe the second time or third time if this keeps going on to who?
Vice Mayor and Councilmember Pizzillo, good question. And so what it is we still reserve the right to pursue civil and criminal sanctions against those repeat offenders. And what we did is we wanted to put a clause in the ordinance that would allow us to do that at our discretion. As far as when there's a problem, then we're going to have to pursue that in some manner. We have to have some teeth to this.
No, I don't disagree. I guess to me that might be the hammer if you have these repeats keep going on and on. Are we looking at some type of site where they've got to go to court?
Yes, sir.
Fine? Okay.
Yes, sir. And that could be to any or all of the involved parties, depending on where the mistake or problem is occurring.
I'm just a firm believer. Anything you can do that can focus on trying to stop the false alarms, whether it's through education or whatever, I'm in on it because 97% really is unacceptable, and it's always going to take that one time where you don't go there and somebody's being held where you have a problem. So you got to call on all of them. You can't just not call. So there's got to be an education or something to put the onus back on those individuals to reduce those number of calls. So at least I appreciate this effort to try to do that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And we were looking for, and we truly feel this is a win-win-win from the alarm businesses to the residents to the police department. We're very excited to see if this is going to work and that the national data, if it will truly apply in our city as well.
Sure.
I apologize because I know you were covering this, but I was transitioning from phone to in here. So
Yes, ma'am.
from what it sounds like you were saying, we would get rid of the city applications for the alarms for residential. Is that right?
Vice Mayor and Councilmember Loretano, that's a great question. What that is looking at, and I want to make sure that I'm answering that properly. We're not looking at removing the business permitting as they're operating business in the city limits, but we're looking at removing the homeowner's application and permit and the business owner's application and permit.
And I have a question. I had a couple of people who have filled it out for this year, but their checks haven't been cashed and they've been sitting for over a month. Is that why they haven't been cashed? Because you're waiting to determine how this affects, or what?
That's another great question, ma'am. That's multifaceted, the answer to that is. One is because simply we don't have staff to deal with it. When that position was frozen, we've been trying to keep the ship afloat, if I may, with a volunteer. And our volunteers are great. They've dedicated, hundreds of thousands of hours to our department and our success. Unfortunately, there's just so much work. We find that November, December are our heaviest months in the year, where we receive hundreds to thousands of permits. And we are working through that. We have identified a part-time staff member to help us work that pile down so we don't have that problem and get those into the system.
Molly.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. I'm assuming it's on. I didn't touch it. What did I do?
You turned it off.
I did. Okay. No, I didn't. All right. I got cut off. I have a couple of questions. What is the fine now if you have a false alarm? Is it $200 the same or $300?
Vice Mayor and Councilmember Campbell, Right now, it depends on, again, where the problem occurs. If it's a repeat offender, so we have 3 free.
Wow.
And then we start to get into a progressive financial.
That's very generous to do that.
Yes, ma'am.
Before I moved here, my alarm, I paid a $350 fine my first time because we had it set wrong. And I didn't pay it again because I learned how to operate it very quickly. The second thing is you're saying that you're going to do away with an application for someone to have an alarm within our city?
Vice Mayor and Councilmember Campbell, let me clarify that.
Okay.
What it is it's removing the permitting within the police department. We created a false alarm unit that put an additional onus on our citizens and business owners to come into the police department and fill out additional paperwork. Our city code, the current one and proposed one, still continues to mandate that a administrative function still occurs. So if a citizen moves in and wants to install an alarm from ABC company, they have to still fill out all of the appropriate permits and everything, the paperwork with them. We're just eliminating the additional paperwork within the police department.
Okay, so once you do this, then the city or the police department itself will have no realistic idea how many alarms are within, or how many homeowners own alarms within our city. That's correct. It'll be up to the alarm companies.
Yes, ma'am.
To maintain those records. Is there any need for us to know?
I would say that that's data that's insignificant to the police department.
Because I had to pay a permit fee to Sacramento County Sheriff's Department to have my alarm even installed,
Yes, ma'am.
so that they knew who has alarms. So I just wondered, why are we getting rid of that? I know it's an extra step, but I had to pay a fee, and that money went to their department to administer that fee. So,
in our opinion, it doesn't do anything to help us.
so you don't make any money off of it.
No.
We lose $41,000.
I heard that, Gary. I understood that part, but okay. So
Yes, ma'am.
all you're asking us to do is to throw out the ordinance that we now have and to start with a new ordinance that is going to set up another way for the alarm company to verify if, in fact, it is a true alarm or a false alarm.
Yes, ma'am.
And while that's occurring, the alarm is still going to go off, and our police department is still going to be notified. And we're hoping that the alarm company notifies the police department that it's a false alarm before our officers respond. Am I understanding this correctly?
Vice Mayor and Councilmember Campbell, that's a little incorrect, because what happens is the way it's set up is the alarm monitoring company, they become in essence the reporting person to the police department.
Okay.
There are no direct dials from the homes or business to the police department telecommunications. As a matter of fact, that's prohibited.
Okay.
We don't want that. That's a bad thing, because there's no control or safeguards in place. It would overwhelm our communications center. So when that signal is set off and goes off, it's going to go to the alarm monitoring company. They're then going to enact enhanced call verification. They're going to make the one call in. Hopefully it's resolved at that point. If it's not, they're just simply going to dial one more phone number, 30 seconds, and if they don't get a response, they will have met all of the criteria they need to do. They're going to send the signal to the Goodyear Police Department. We're going to get dispatched.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I do know communities that have that in place, that it works. And I'm delighted that you're stepping out to do this, that perhaps it will save our manpower and make it more productive for everyone and safer for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I just have a couple of statements, actually. First of all, I appreciate everyone looking at this. I know when I talk about finding efficiencies within our government, this is right on target with that. This saves us money and frees up some folks. So appreciate you guys looking at it from that perspective. The other thing, if we were to draw a parallel or a comparison between this and my experience with fire alarms, in the other states that I've lived and worked in, we responded to every single fire alarm as though it were a real fire until we were heard otherwise. When I moved to the Phoenix area, the fire department had this system where they called first before we got dispatched. And it sounded like a crazy idea, but I can tell you I don't think I can even remember of any of our companies responding on false fire alarms. And I probably responded to several thousand of them elsewhere. So because of how the alarms are installed with the second phone call, I think we're going to see a significant change, and with very little effect on the customer. And as an alarm owner myself, I'm not personally worried either. So kudos to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I just had a couple of questions. Within the ordinance itself, in section 21-2-2, it talks about prohibited devices and systems, and you stated, and within here it says that it is unlawful to have systems that automatically dials or program to automatically dial directly to a police department. Do you know if you have a system that does that? Would you truly know if there was someone's home or a business that actually that occurred? Could you tell that? I mean, how do you know? I guess because, you know, over the years, all the different alarm systems that I've had, there have been ones that it was stated it was going directly to the police station, whether it be the panic buzzers or, you know, some functions of alarm systems have it where, you know, if you are in a situation that it's so it's silent because of the situation you're in, but it automatically is connecting, so we've been told over the years, to the police department. I guess that's a concern of mine, because I don't know how those work anymore. That's why I'm asking, do you know how that works?
Yes, ma'am. Vice Mayor, the answer to that question, and I, of course, will confirm that with our telecom manager, is I feel that someone might have been tricking you in the past, because simply we have to receive the call from that reporting person who is that clearinghouse or the alarm monitoring business, and they are the ones who make the call in. I took the time to meet with dispatch and obtain audio just so I could have a better understanding of what they hear. There's a very set protocol as far as what goes down. So I would tentatively answer your question with yes, we would certainly know if that were happening. It's my understanding that that's not possible and is not existing in our jurisdiction.
Okay.
But I could certainly check, ma'am.
And I'm sure that the way that was probably presented in the past is that it's really a function that's going straight to the monitoring company, and they see it differently or something.
Yes, ma'am. And what it would do is it would circumvent the enhanced call or verification process, and it would come directly to the PD in that.
Okay, so, you know, you had said that the first 3 were free. It has been the past ways you've been doing it. Nowhere in here is there outline that says the 10th we're finally going to get on you. Is there going to be a problem with that if someone finally says, well, you don't have in here that says is someone going to come to you and say, well, you can't charge me this because it's really not outlined that I'm allowed to get away with so many before I have to pay this $300? You know, has that been, Rourke, I don't know if that's something that you're not really outlining that. It's up to the department, so.
Susan Rogers has been working on that in our office.
Thanks,
We'll
Susan.
put her on the hot seat.
Okay.
Thanks. The way this is written, we don't have to have 1 or 2. We're going to know who the problem people are.
Okay.
And dispatch monitors that. They'll let you know, the officers know. And there's a mechanism in here to make everything either a civil or criminal violation. So there's a method to pursue those people, and it would be a civil offense. So it actually is something we would prove, as opposed to a false alarm violation where they just get the notice and the fee. Okay. So it's hopefully more effective.
Well, I think the call verification sounds really good. I hope that that will make a big difference. And I appreciate you guys looking into that. Gary and I know we've talked about this quite often. And I wish there was volunteers enough that could have taken this position, you know, that would have done the job, but it doesn't sound like that's the case. So.
Yes, ma'am.
Couple of things. One, I'm glad the police department will not be handling cash or checks anymore. I never thought that was a good idea. In all the years that I sent my money into the PD, it was like, I should be sending it into the finance department along with my trash fees and my water fees and any other fees that I do that. So that's one thing. The second thing I want to say is I really strongly feel that dispatch should keep some type of record on false alarms. I know that I've sat in the center, and I know they have an ability to code locations or indicate what's going on, and they should be able to work their database so that you guys know when the 10th time comes, it's time for a civil discussion, maybe in court. Last thing is, and I don't want to tell you guys how to run the department, but the question is, why are we having 2 cars or 2 vehicles? And I'll just throw that out and say, if 99.7% of the alarms are false, why don't we send 1 car who can check it out, at least look and see if I need backup, because that's where it's going. But I don't want to get into that discussion right now. I just want to toss that idea out and say there is an efficiency in that.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Gelser, that is the process that we're moving to, and the reason that it is 2 cars is nationwide they have always had 2 cars respond, whether right or wrong, but yes, it's far more efficient to have 1 car respond.
I would just think it's a safety issue. Just my.
Well, and I know I asked this question in the past.
Don't have to go in.
Of the 99.7% false alarms, from what I'm hearing is the breakdown is 75% of those calls are homeowners. 25% of those calls are businesses. I would have to say, if the department and management decided that you were going to send 1 vehicle, I would hate to see the businesses be the ones on the end of getting, they need to have the 2 responses. Either way, I'm just saying that you've got a couple different opinions here, so I'm going to want to voice that one at least. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, and Chief Geyer is also, we've been working with Chief Geyer and command staff, executive staff on this very issue to determine if there are efficiencies while still weighing out the officer safety component to it. There are discussions right now of making procedure changes on that very, very concept as far as residents versus business, et cetera, and how can we minimize or reduce that number even more. So we're on the same page.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is that good? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Susan.
Okay, Ms. Romina. Mayor and Council to review and provide direction on the 2012 state and federal legislative agenda.
I know, sorry. Good evening. I'm going to kind of go through a very short PowerPoint and give you guys just a little bit of an update on how we've evolved the legislative program here. I know some people on council are new and haven't been through a full session. And it's been about 4 years. It's my 5th session here at the city. And every year we add more and more, or we kind of tune up the process to make it better and then tune it up according to the council's needs. And so this is an opportunity for you to kind of tell me what it is that your expectations are, what you would like to see more of during the session, and also what we have the capability of doing, because we aren't necessarily set up like the larger cities, so we don't have all the capability of the larger cities. But I'm just going to kind of go through what we do currently, how we operate, and then just let me know if you have any questions along the way. Feel free to stop me. Okay, so this is kind of how we operate the legislative process. In the beginning of every session, council reviews and approves the legislative agenda. And as you know, through your COAC, the legislative agenda is very brief. It's overarching 30,000-foot guidelines. And the reason we do that is because we all coordinate as cities across the valley on those overarching guidelines so that we can operate together when the bills come through the process. Most bills that you see in the process will fall under those guidelines. If something does not fall under the guidelines or we aren't quite sure, a lot of us come back to our city councils, and that's happened where we get direction on a specific item if it doesn't touch through that. Staff goes through and reviews the bills. That's me. I do that in coordination with the league every week. We go through and review the summaries. We try to find out what the bills are saying and how they impact us. I then coordinate with our department directors and management on responses on those bills. So a lot of times, in the past few years, it's been less and less need for department directors to look at every single bill because, as you know, legislation, so much of it is repeat and we know what it's doing, or it's just a newer version of things we've done in the past. And so it's easy for me to identify it, I already know what we've done in the past. There are some items that come up that are new. I send those out to the directors. My directors are probably, and I can say this with bias, probably some of the best around the valley. They get to me quickly. They're involved daily on what's happening down there, and their input is very direct, and they know exactly what's going on and what I need to do in their response to that. If there's something that's out of the ordinary that we haven't seen before, I do share it with John weekly. We go through kind of those issues. John and I go through and make sure that we're headed down the right direction. If something is, like I said, out of the ordinary, haven't seen it before, we may consider bringing it to council, or he'll bring it to you on your one-on-one to get feedback, or maybe during a work session, whatever that setup is. Those recommended positions are then coordinated weekly. So the intergovs meet weekly on Fridays at the league, and all of us talk about how we're going to coordinate those positions based on how they impact our individual cities. There are some pieces of legislation that impact large cities that don't impact small, rural versus urban. This is all part of that coordination process at the league, and so we have those discussions, and we talk about what the next steps are with the league staff as well as us individual intergovs, and then which legislators are involved in that process, if they're part of that bill or not, what we do. I'm not going to go through all of the state and federal guiding principles. Those are in your COAC, but these are the topics that we go through. Fiscal sustainability are these are the things that we cover in the agenda. We preserve local authority, economic development, military preservation, transportation infrastructure, and grants are specific to the feds. Military preservation falls under both of our state and federal, and that's obviously to protect Luke Air Force Base as well as any other efforts we have statewide for other military sites.
Romina, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Is there ever a priority regarding any water issues, whether it be, just water in general or wastewater? You have transportation infrastructure, so that's why I was
It should say,
wondering.
it should say transportation and infrastructure, not just infrastructure.
Okay.
So yes, water falls under infrastructure, as well as fiscal sustainability, because that impacts our everyday, and economic development. So water issues, depending on how they fall, will fall under all of those items. But yes, transportation and infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
This is what we've done in the past when it comes to council communications. And again, this is open for discussion, feedback. Every council member is different, would like to see different things. Weekly summaries usually go out as items happen. There are some lull weeks where it's just committee items, nothing of major concern. Maybe some of our bills aren't there. But weekly summaries will go out when we have items of concern that'll give you an update on what's happening down at the legislature. Action alerts are something new that the league is doing this year, and that is to help a lot of the rural cities get more involved. What's happened in the past is, the valley cities have intergovs, and so we have a day-to-day process. We're down there. Our council members and mayor, are very involved in the process, whereas a lot of the rural areas don't have that kind of ability. They don't have an intergov. And so these action alerts are really set up to get them more updated and get them active and know what issues are coming up and so how they can respond. Email updates from staff as bills go through the process. If there's a specific bill that impacts us or that is of hot alert or anything that rises to that level, I will send out an email update to John and to the directors and let them know where that's going. That's usually always forwarded on to council as an update. You should already have seen a couple of those throughout the process. And then in your council business agenda, there's always a standing underneath the city manager's communications. There's a standing spot for him to update you on anything of any importance that maybe would come up, so that that's part of the public process. Usually about halfway through the session, if it's requested, we can do another work session, or I just can update you at a council meeting just as official business, not really for action, but just an update. And then every year we do a legislative wrap-up report. And that's it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Questions? Joe?
Just real quick, I like what the league's doing. You know, I kind of read those. I like the short, sweet synopsis of what the legislative is intending to do, and they say whether they're for it or against it. But I would like, from our perspective, is just something short and sweet, executive size, could be a paragraph long, but within that ending paragraph, how it impacts us. You know, it doesn't have to be a lot of detail. For example, one of the water bill issues that they're looking to remove the fee on the find a way of funding, you know, the water resource fee that they've charged on us. One says there's a bill to remove it, how it impacts us, there'll be savings. If not, we're still paying for it, you know. So I'm really interested in anything that directly impacts local government authority, okay? Anything that touches that more specifically, so. Does that help you, Ramina?
It does. There's some of those that we'll be able to do because it'll have a fiscal impact, or, you know, it's easy to stick a number down there and say this is our savings or this is our impact. Some of it is more obscure, and we can kind of figure it out as we go what that actual operational impact would be or how that would change what we do. But yeah, we can work that out.
Well, we'll just add real quick, as they mentioned today about the mall, you know, negative things that comes out of the state with some of our legislators and things they attempt to do down there. You know, the negative press we get, you know, as he mentioned tonight, that's what people are seeing. And they don't segregate Goodyear out. They put us into this big lump called the state of Arizona. So if there's anything like that going on, which, yeah, right, that we may want to look at as well, even though it's a state issue, but it directly impacts us or indirectly impacts us because of the negativity that's going to shine on us, would be interested in that as well.
Yeah, Sherry.
Yeah, I appreciate the last couple action alerts and information coming from you about what's going on, because that really helps me a lot. I don't want to be in everything. I just want to kind of know what's going on. So when you come back, we at least kind of can get a history of what's going on. And especially if there isn't action alerts, but when the budget comes on, if you hear any rumblings of, as we do our budget process, I would appreciate, even if it's another update, if something really drastic comes with the budget this year, I'd appreciate that. But you do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely, when the budget comes along, any kind of impacts that are in the budget that impact even, you know, even tax decisions that are made, those I work with Larry and with others on the staff to find out how those are going to impact our bottom line or even our budgetary. Any trickle down, we do that at least as effective as we can, and we get that message out, and that's also shared with management. So during the budget process, you guys are notified, here's what the state is doing, here's how it could impact us, just as even if it hasn't passed yet, but these are some things that are happening right now.
And like I said, you do a great job, and I appreciate that. It really does help out a lot.
Thanks.
And because, you know, they don't, how should I put it? You have job security because, you know, they like that local control, don't they? I'm being sarcastic. Yes, Wally.
I have a couple of questions, and it's not working again. My questions are, I'm not real comfortable with having other folks make the decision as to what this city will support and not support as far as legislative bills go. I would like to have a list of the bills that are identified that collectively you with the other intergovernmental staff have decided with the league that they want Goodyear to support or oppose. And the reason I am somewhat hesitant, I've been talking to other elected council members in Phoenix, Surprise, Litchfield Park, Peoria, several other cities, and we all feel that we're elected to see what's good for Goodyear. We're not to run the city. Our city manager is doing that. However, I don't want to be in the position again that we found ourselves this summer where we were in opposition to something and it was implied that we were maybe in support of something. While I don't, I understand the legislative process. I understand how it works. But I just feel that as elected representatives, we need to know what bills you are recommending that we support or oppose. And I'm not sure that you can blanket approve for all the cities that it's good for one city, it's good for all cities. I don't have a feel for that yet, although I have been going through all the bills that have been introduced. I have several lists I will give you of bills that I would appreciate and knowing if any of those bills have been identified when you meet with your group. And I would like to have an update regularly, not every week, but I guess if you do them every week, that would be fine too. Once you get the bill set, if you can send out a blast to let us know where they are. Because on the ones that really affect this city, I want to go down and testify either in support or in opposition to them. We should be down there at the legislature. We are the elected people. We are the elected representatives, and we should be down there on behalf of our cities. And that's all I could say. But I have been reading the list and trying to track down so that it's not too over-empowering, because if the bills that I'm looking at are the same that you are, we're on the same wavelength. But there may be a bill that y'all don't identify that I think may be something we're interested in.
Okay, well, we could attack that in a couple different ways. I keep we've got a hot list, and that's our internal list of what bills the city is tracking, and that may be the bills that impact us or cities statewide. So when you share with me your list, I can make sure that they're on that particular list. We'll add those to that. And then as far as recommended positions, I'm just trying to understand how you want to work this. I could easily go through that hot list and note in there what the recommended positions are. However, at this point, it's just a recommended position because there's no way for me to come back to council every single week and get direction on every single one of those bills. So there's 500 bills tagged. There's no way for me to come back here every week and go through that. I mean, the closest city that does that is the city of Phoenix. They do it every other week, and they have a special work session every other week that goes through legislation piece by piece, and it lasts about 3 hours long. And so that's the only city that has that type of internal feedback from their council members. Okay. So I'm happy providing you what those recommended positions are. That's not a problem at all. We do that every week at the league, and we go down there and just because something is good for other cities does not mean it's good for us. And in those situations where that does occur, we do step aside and say this doesn't work for Goodyear. That does happen, and we do reserve the right to go down there and say exactly that. While it works for other cities, it does not work for us. So it's not a blanket situation at all.
I thought you said you gave email updates. That's what I was talking about, is what was in your slide where you do weekly.
Yes,
I'm not talking about anything over and above what you already do.
Okay, so I can attach the list to those email updates, and you guys can kind of see that list. Okay, we can do that.
Works for me. Thank you.
I do appreciate, not that Wally didn't, sorry, I didn't mean to imply that.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. Remember, I talked about what came out of the other end of the horse. I do appreciate those updates. They've been, as a new council person, immensely helpful to just see where we're at and how things are progressing. I think this spring will be an incredible learning experience for me, being new. So, wanted to say thank you for that. One of the, and I'm not sure if this is the forum tonight or when this, because I think this is going to come before us for an official. We're going to get an official
agenda approved.
Yes, agenda
yes,
approved.
yes,
Okay. Well, then I guess this is the right place. The federal grants piece. When the last legislation was passed in Washington, when it came to public safety grants, what they did this year, which is different than what they've done in past years, is they just said to the Secretary of Homeland Defense, here's the pile of money, you decide, instead of divvying it up based on how it's been in the past. The Phoenix region has been extremely successful in urban area security monies, and we have been extremely successful in securing grants for that. And I'm hopeful that we're going to have a discussion on how we can at least advance the concern into Washington about how that's going to affect, one of the nation's largest regions. And I'm not sure how we want to do that, but I definitely want to make sure that this council is aware of how that's going to work. I think we're pretty close to $2 million now in federal grant money through this security initiative. So,
Well, let me just give you a little bit of an update on how the federal process is going to work. Congress hasn't passed a budget in over 1,000 days. It says 1,300 in your COAC. It's 1,000. That was a misprint. Sorry about that. And what they have done is they've done continuing resolutions to continue the budget because you have to do something. We don't see anything specific overarching with regards to budget. They may start to attack separate departments differently, but the key here is that with no earmarking, and earmarking is supposed to be an ugly term, but earmarking really is the prerogative of the legislature on how to spend that money, there's not going to be a difference in how they do it. They are literally going to appropriate a certain bulk of money to a department, whether it's transportation, public, whatever it is, Homeland Security, and they're going to say, you guys spend it, which is why grants has become such a huge push in the past couple of years. In the past, grants were just programs like CDBG and those things that we worked with, and we were able to go down to Congress and say, here's a special need that our city has or our region has. Can you put it part of the budget bill? And they would do that. That is gone. And so with that being gone, everything's going to go through grants or programs that are created that are of grant-like. And so this is why so much emphasis is putting forward on grants. And this is something for our council to understand is if you're going to put more emphasis on grants, we've got to put more emphasis on grant matching, because you can't really get a grant unless you've got some dollars to match with that. And so it's an evolution. All cities are going through it. All councils are starting to go through it. How much of this grant game are we going to play, and how much of it is going to be part of that budgetary process? Because really you can't apply for a grant unless you've got a specific match requirement. And then there's regional planning too. A lot of these grants are so huge coming out of the federal government that, like public safety is very regional in nature. So is going to be transportation and infrastructure. And so we're going to have to start partnering with our cities in the Southwest Valley, in the West Valley, and in the Valley on a lot of those things. So things that we used to get in the past, like maybe a road down Bullard or a Yuma bridge or, Bullard Wash improvements, we were able to do that before on our own. They don't like to see that stuff anymore. They want to see you partnering regionally with other and with private entities. They want to see public-private partnerships. They want to see regional, and that's where you're getting those grants. So it's a lot of changes in the world of grants, and we're trying to catch up the best that we can.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Can I ask a question on that one? For the grants, are they going now with the budget and everything more for a cash match, or can they still do a like kind, or are they really looking for the cash match?
They want to see a core investment in yourself. And so that's kind of the pulse of everything, is what are you investing in yourself as a local government? And so the cash match, they're not saying that in-kind doesn't help. In-kind definitely helps, but a lot of grants will say a 25% match, 10% match. They want to see it in your CIP. They want to see what year where funding is going to come from. And they want to see you spend the grant money in a certain amount of time. And so there's a lot of these strings that are attached that we hadn't seen in the past. And that's because they're trying to get this federal money spent. They're under the wire just like we are to create jobs. And so if you're going to get grant funding, they don't want you sitting on it for 5 years.
They want you to have a vested interest.
You have right. And so that's really the underlying attitude towards all of the grants.
And can you, I know that you do the grants too, right? On top
Christine
of
does, but she works with me, yes. She's the lead on it.
Could we get maybe a work session on that so we kind of know what's out there, what the city is looking for as we go through the budget process? Because I think that'd be very helpful to know what's out there. So if it is something that we'd like to apply for and there's a cash match, we can kind of keep that in mind as we go through the budget.
We can take a look at that, certainly.
Thanks.
Good.
Well, I appreciate the call to actions. Those are nice. And I think really the only other question I had, and maybe you'll have to tell us later, but if any new news on the model tax code, if that's been coming into play or not.
There are a couple of items that they're working on. The Model City Tax Code, there's a couple of bills, and Larry can correct me on this one because he was on the finance call most early today. There are a few bills that are addressing the Model City Tax Code, not specifically the Model City Tax Code, but the process that we're going through. One or two of them are addressing the creation of a portal for those self-collecting cities. We're going through an exercise where there's going to be a portal created, and businesses can get onto one site where they could register their taxes. That's kind of a work in process with those self-collecting cities, which will eventually, I think, expand if it works along the process. And I think when Kevin and Larry were up here, they talked a little bit about simplifying the tax code and how we have to start creating these things in order to participate when the internet sales tax comes online at the federal government. We've got to start doing some of these things. So that's step one. There's another bill that's out there that's creating and I'm sure I don't have the wording right, but it's like it's a committee that's going to oversee the process of the simplification of the tax code. And they're still creating the wording of that, and the hope is that what we're hoping for is that they not only just have a bunch of legislators on there, that they include city representatives, finance guys, bond people, so that they can really look at how to do this effectively over the next year or two. And that's being looked at as a positive thing. If they draft it correctly and they have the right people sitting on that committee correctly, we can really get some discussions going. So those are, I think, the two biggest coming from that front.
Thank you.
Sure.
In the Sunday finance section, one of the columnists wrote an article about use tax, and the Arizona income tax does not have a suggested table for use tax transaction fees. Is that something that the legislature is going to look at, since California does have a use tax suggested table? If you don't itemize, you come up with based on a certain income level, they expect you to report this amount of money as a use tax.
I don't know that this legislature would go that far this session. I know that overall in the entire tax reform discussion that everything is going to be on the table when we start talking about all types of taxes and how they're going to be structured and what we're going to tax, everything from services to use. I think it's just all going to be on the table.
Okay.
I don't know at what form or what level that'll be, if that's kind of phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 3. That's what we're trying to figure out at this point, is what are those things that we're going to start attacking first. The goal here is that we have at least some sort of guidance before that half a cent or 1 cent that we passed to citizens a couple of years ago that falls off in 2014. There's some direction on where we're going before that happens, because that, I think, is going to go back out to the ballot again. And so that there's got to be some sort of tax structure to attack that if that does not pass.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for being
Sure.
Okay, last item on the agenda. Oh, this will be short. The mid-year financial review with Terry Canada. Would you like a break?
No, if you read it, it should be short.
Oh, you'll like.
The news is partially cloudy with a little bit of sun coming out.
I have questions. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. I got notes based on slides, but I saw you have a break somewhere where it has questions after about 6 slides or something like that. Would you prefer to wait to that point to go back, or would you prefer to go by slide when you get to the slide?
Vice Mayor, Council, it really doesn't matter to me. I'll take questions as we go. They're usually brief.
Yeah,
Okay.
just go and be sure, Terry, to pull that mic up to you. Thank you.
Okay, with that, good evening, Vice Mayor, Council. I'm going to be brief with this. We do it every quarter. This is the second quarter for fiscal year 12, would be through month ending December of 11. I think we've probably been doing it about 2 years, so I've not changed the format. It's pretty much simple. It is from this report that was included in your packet. Briefly, I'm going to talk with exception. I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail again because we've done this a number of times. Currently, revenues are coming in at about 5% what we would expect at mid-year. This is annualized out. So again, explaining if we get stronger revenues in a certain quarter or month, this is factored in here. We generally receive more revenue in the second half of the year, primarily from sales tax, Christmas sales, and some stronger retail that goes on around that time that posts in February. For the general fund expenditure side, we're running about 42% through mid-year. Again, this is what you would expect. We have generally heavier spending in the second half of the year. For personnel services, we were through end of the year at half of the pay periods. So there probably is expected a small savings with the personnel expenses.
Got a question on this slide, Terry. You want to go back? Does that general fund revenue include construction sales tax?
Yes, it does.
I think we had talked about this before, to try to break it out. And the reason for it is simply this. I want to try to get a feel for where our general fund operating revenue is going, because our sales tax is supposed to be for one-time money. So if our sales tax is growing faster than our non-construction sales tax, this 105 doesn't really tell me anything. Doesn't tell me if we're trending, at 3% above, 4% above, because I like to look at both of them different, operating and construction. So I think it's important to break out the construction and the non-construction for that reason, because policy has non-construction for one time. So again, it's not probably the first time we talked about this, but I really would like to see that broken out.
You've mentioned it many times, and I agree with you on that.
We will make sure to include that next time.
Thank you.
Terry? Okay, I do have a question on the commodities piece, as long as we're talking just in generalization. We're at 25%, and I understand the heavier purchasing that will occur at the end of the year. But I would imagine that we've got some sort of trend that we can see where 25% is let me just say it this way. 75% left to spend is an awful lot in the next 4 months. Do we have any trending information that shows where we're at with commodities? Because I noticed later on in the information you talk about we do anticipate some budget surplus at the end of the year. But do you have a feel for that?
We do. We actually run analysis by month for all of the departments. It isn't part of this report, but we can certainly get you a report or include it in one of the summaries. The department summary in the report here, although it's not broke down by the categories here, it will tell you who is on track for spending. And so if there's a great deal of savings in one of the departments, then we then further analyze if it's because of seasonal spending. You would expect in Parks and Recreation, some of the spending comes in the summer. It's seasonal. Same thing with Street Department. We have a large project that we usually do in the spring of the year. So there are some of those things coming into play here. Traditionally in government, the spending for the commodities, again, because we post year-end closing, we pay a lot of the prior year bills in July. That kind of slows down just the process of getting the procurement going, and then we've got to get the vendors on board. But I can certainly get you a report that shows by department kind of where we're at comparison year to year.
Well, I don't know if we need to go year to year, but just typically mid-year we tend to trend more to 42% or, something to that effect. I think this is a double-edged sword that we end up with. Commodities are at 25%. That's awesome. That means that the directors are really buckling down, and we're only buying the exact number of pens and paper that we need. But it also could be an indication for something a little bit longer term issue that are we over budgeted? So that's kind of my commodities question. I do have one on the personnel. So we can go ahead.
Just to piggyback on what you had mentioned, I think some of the IT stuff probably falls in June on some of the contracts or whether they're licensing. But again, I think there's value to follow what you were mentioning on trending, because what is the potential, and again, it's trending changes, wouldn't hold you to it, but it would be nice to see what our projected at halfway through the year, additional revenues, expense savings. We're looking at $1 million, $2 million, $500,000. If this trend holds, and again, it's simply a trend, all right? Because that typically is used for one-time money at the end of the year anyway, but it'd be kind of nice to know what kind of one-time money possibly would be available for doing a variety of projects, et cetera. And if the trend changes, the trend changes, but I think that's very helpful, especially when you're 6 months in. First quarter, it's tough, but 6 months, it would be nice to start to see some of that trending. But I suspect some of those commodities for the 25% is because some of the things that get paid in June.
Right, and I know, we had, on the fire side, we did a tremendous amount in the special ops program at the end of the year, so I completely get that.
But you can still trend it, though.
Sure. The other question that I had was the personnel services side. In the report, and I think it's on page 7 of the financial document, under salaries, it says there are 17 vacant positions within the general fund. Can we get a list of what those are?
Sure.
as we get ready to go into the budget season here. Thank you.
And to kind of just to generally address a couple of the things we've talked about here. First, before I forget, the vacancies is a point in time, and so probably HR, we're at February 1st in a couple of days. It may change. It's probably better to just give you the February 1st vacancy list. I just try and include that at a point in time when we do the report. Councilmember Pizzillo, I think what I can do on this report, we actually have detailed analysis on the construction sales tax year over year, budget to actual in the detailed revenue section part. I think probably why this is being omitted here is because we're trying to tie to the $61.9 million. I think right below that, perhaps I'll just break out the construction sales tax. That way we can keep the integrity of the number of general fund that we're budgeted to, but still provide the information that I think you're looking for.
What I'm trying to get to is how is our operating revenue general fund trending? And with the construction in there, excuse it, either up or down, depending on how construction is running. So what I'm trying to do is figure out how our total operating revenue is trending, because if it's trending 2 to 3, that's good, but it's not as good as 5 or 6, depending on where the construction is. So that's what I'm really interested in, is where the general fund, operating, revenue is trending.
Okay, and I will, when we get in the revenue section, just right here, we can talk about the detail of this. Moving ahead to the top revenues for general fund. Property taxes, it comes in a couple times a year. We've received half of the payments. It's coming right in at budget. Sales tax, which does include construction sales tax, which is coming in strong this year, is right around 7% up from what we would expect. This does include a one-time use payment of, I want to say, a little less than $400,000, so it will, again, skew this up a bit. Urban revenue, auto lieu, state share, those are all right on budget and are received through the state.
Could you talk about auto lieu? Why is it's significantly off? Do we have a problem that people are registering their cars out of state because they don't want to pay the fees here in Arizona, and as a result, we're not getting our share?
The auto lieu, let me just back up and kind of give you the source of where the numbers come from. The league gives all the cities and towns a report. It's usually in March every year of their estimate for these 3 revenue sources. Almost everybody takes their number, and that becomes what you put in the budget. The number for auto lieu is running about 11% short of that. If we trend it out
statewide or citywide?
Right, statewide, from their budget number, and then again they divide it out and give each city and town their estimated portion, if you will. Traditionally, this runs higher in the second half too, but this number is, weighted, so it's running about 10% low. We'll continue to monitor this and follow it through to the end of the year. It's normally
it's not a significant lot of, we're not talking millions of dollars, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it's still somewhat off.
And it had been down the last couple years.
Okay, thank you.
And so this was,
That's fine.
estimated up.
Terry, on the sales tax figure, I would question, I would assume that the budget for the second quarter had included the change of, we thought that back in September the food tax would have been less, or the retail, because that would have been taken away, but it actually didn't occur. So we should be trending a little bit over budget for that matter, correct? Because it actually didn't happen until now. I don't know how much of a difference that is. I know it's not 7%, but is it small enough that it's only, say, 1% difference? I don't know what the figure is.
It wouldn't impact the percentage. I think we estimated about $375,000
for the whole year.
And again, we're right. Our sales tax revenue is quite large, and so it wouldn't impact that. We will know the good news about that. I'll just kind of share this for your information. The tax reduction was delayed, and it did go into effect. We have an estimate. We've actually included it as a reduction. We won't know. I think we need 2 2 months, 3 months of data, and then we'll actually know what that number is. Because it was our best guess.
Right.
We're hoping that we're close, but we just, we won't know until we do all the tax returns and people file and pay that. So by the next quarter, hopefully we'll know. But again, it's such a minor amount, it won't impact the percentage at all.
Okay.
And then back to Councilmember Gelser's comment, the auto was about $2.2 million in total. Yeah.
Okay.
So like I said, we'll just continue to monitor that. I'm not hearing any reason why that is down. It could be their estimate is off, but generally they're really close at the lake.
Well, before you leave that page, I'm going to jump on Councilman Pizzillo's bandwagon about separating on the sales tax. You said construction sales tax was in there too?
Correct.
Same thing. It would help me too if you separate it out, especially one of the issues is like the sales tax. What are our sales trending like when we're talking about bringing them all in? You know, I'd like to know what the actual retail type sales or sales are as opposed to, you know, adding in with the construction sales tax.
We can certainly do that. That's why every month in the report I send to you, I break it down by construction sales tax, retail sales tax, hotel, motel, everything. So we will make sure to do that here also.
Thank you.
The construction sales tax is going to include the ADOT for the 303 expansion. So that number for the next couple of, I think it's 3 years, is going to be skewed even differently. Would it benefit us if we had that separated out from our construction?
I don't think we can separate that ADOT, a specific project out. We have given you a report,
Right.
which I will give you again, that says that we will get 1.3 the first year, 2.4 the second year, and 1 point something the third year. That we can, if we identify construction sales tax separately, that's about all we can do. We can't say that this is for this project or this is for that project.
No, I wouldn't. I would not take it any farther than that ADOT. I'm going to call it cash infusion for those 3 years. I think next year I envision we're going to be sitting here having this very discussion, and we're going to see construction sales tax, compared to last year, is up, 110%.
And it may not be up all that much because we're just coming out of I-10.
Yeah. So I don't know if that will help in any of the other discussion.
Well, that may have just answered one of my questions here, because within the report, the plan review, permit, and inspection fees was at 132%. There's a big difference there, and I'm wondering if that was because of the 303. I mean, that was
No, that is not because of the 303.
So that was just.
That's construction.
That was exciting then. Okay.
Well,
so that's a good variance on
our
that.
estimates are so low in that area now. Anything's good news.
Thank you.
And again, when we put this together in the report, there is detailed information both about retail tax, again, year over year, what we're seeing, construction sales tax. Obviously, the sales tax auditor is doing analysis on that, and he has privileged information about who is filing and how the projects are, as they're trending out, and we're, finishing up some major projects, the ones that we know are coming in, and that all is included in our analysis and our forecast when we put it together. And John was right on with the development-related revenue. We had estimated, I think, about $800,000 last year, and the budgeted amount is so low that we're doing good. It is coming in better. It's primarily from tenant improvements, and we are beginning to see some commercial, which was virtually non-existent over the last couple years. So we're happy to say that it's up. Things are starting to move. It's unfortunate that the budget is just really low. So any other questions on any of the categories here? I'll try. I think the information is in here on the detail of the taxes. I'll just try to include it in the summary slides where it somewhat makes sense without skewing the totals.
Can you, the last revenue question that I have that's not actually up there is related to our investment earnings. And, excuse me, that we're only at 10% of our budget, or we're only at 2% of our budget, and I just wanted a little clarification on that. On page 29, it says investment earnings, it says annual budget was $244,000, and we have $25,000 as actuals, but it does say December. So I don't know if that's only December, or, because then it's saying it's only 10% of budget. Help
Vice
me out
Mayor-
with this.
Vice Mayor, that was in fiscal year 11, and if you can kind of recall back in the glory days, we were earning substantial money on our investments. As the fund balance dropped, that budget amount probably should have went down. If you move over a column to 12, we've now adjusted that. We also have a new investment policy that's doing quite well, and we are actually at 81%.
Okay, that was my concern, is because I knew we had made that change. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't a bad.
Correct. And the budget
Okay.
from 11, like I said, we as the fund balance went down, the earnings just drastically went down, and the budget should have probably been reduced for that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the revenue? Again, I won't talk too much on this point. Salaries are at 46%. We do expect to see some savings here. The vacancies are running a little bit higher than they have in the previous years. Contractual commodities, the other categories running in at about 42% for the year. Other fund revenues, the four major operating funds, as you can see, are all coming well within budget. Water will usually be stronger in the first half of the year and kind of balance out just due to the hot temperatures. On the other side of this, the expenditures for the other funds are slightly under budget. You will notice that sanitation, and we have had a number of discussions on this, is running about 48%. We do expect that that will probably go over budget and require a transfer by year because of the contract increase costs. Right now, we're not, again, due to the delay in postings for the year end, we're probably showing through 5 months of sanitation payments.
Just a quick, no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up, because that kind of drew my eye when I saw it, when I saw the 98% on revenues on sanitation, and the expenses running at 48, which would make it 96. They almost offset each other. But you tell me in the second half of the year, from a trending standpoint, that's not, there's going to be more spent in the second half of the year than the first half of the year?
Correct, Councilman.
Okay.
Solo.
So it's not washing itself out, is what you're telling me. That's what I think sometimes, and again, don't want to beat a dead horse, but trending is, it's nice to see the actuals and budget, but trending based on historicals and percentage of expenditures, in my view, is more important than budget and actuals, because trending will show that, type of thing. So just my own personal view, I just think it shows more.
And a couple of things that are coming up in the budget process that are kind of, I think I share this with you at each of these quarterly reviews that we do. We're going to meet with the departments. We kind of moved this presentation up. Normally we would have it after we meet with the departments, but the next couple weeks we'll go through reviews with them. They're also developing their estimates for year end over the next couple weeks, and we'll kind of match that out and just kind of check the validity of that, and that will give us a better indication if we have savings in any of the categories, and perhaps identify specific things that are driving the savings.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful.
Also included in the report is, oops, back.
Yeah, I just had like a flash thought on that. If we're going to talk about what's driving the savings, I want to make sure, I think, that we are telling that whole story, that if we're realizing savings because we've not filled positions or we've not done something, that we've reduced or eliminated X service, that is kind of part of that discussion. It's great if we sit here and say, oh, well, the stadium has reduced their expenditures by 4%, but we don't tell what the rest of the story is. I know I'd like to know if we've done that because we've eliminated certain things that we do, or when we talk about achieving the savings, I want to wave the team flag, and celebrate with everybody, but I want to know what there has to be a result of that.
One of the things that I'll point out that I update every time we do this report, in here are the department highlights, and the intent of that summary is to keep it very brief, to exactly outline those things, especially for things that perhaps show We have potential savings now, but we know that a large payment is going to be made in May every year. The YMCA comes to mind because it's substantial. It's probably $230,000, and the budget for that division isn't that big. It always looks like they're underspending, and then that payment goes out in April and puts them right at where they need to be for the year. The other thing is when I look at, and there's a table in here that shows expenditure percent complete for year by department. I try and any of those variances, whether they're plus or minus, I try and get with the departments and get some information and some feedback on them as to what's causing that percentage. So if you begin to link the two, if someone's 10% under budget, you should see in the department highlights what's causing that. And then if there's, again, follow-up that's either needed on it or, the answer is going to come later in the year, that should be identified in there. Also included is the budget transfer, and we had a little discussion on this last time, and so we try to simply elaborate on the explanations that go with the transfers. And so kind of in summary, the way I looked at it, again, there weren't that many this time. Actually, kind of as a point that Rowena was making about the grants, out of the 9 that we have, 5 were related to grants. And so when we get money in, again, we have to legally set up appropriations so we can spend that money, record the anticipated revenue from the grant. One was a donation for the arts program. Again, it was unplanned. We didn't know. We got a few $1,000s so we could spend on the art program. There was a piece of sanitation equipment that did come out of fund balance that they needed to replace. And then
Is that the sanitation? Was that for bulk trash? Was that what that?
That was a grappler for the bulk trash program.
For bulk trash.
For.
So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have or accept feedback on the detail we provided.
Kudos for the extra detail in the transfer thing. I appreciated that. I asked for it. That was very helpful.
Okay, and moving right along, my budget sense of humor here. Actually, it is good news. For a number of years we've been, as you can see here, on the decline. We peaked back in 2008. We are seeing things. We're beginning to see signs of the economy improving. I'll go over a couple of the indicators here in a few slides. But it is, like I said, it is looking better. Single-family permits, you can see what happened to us here over the last few years. This is also stabilized. I think for fiscal year ending 11, for our city, we were trending higher than anticipated. Valley-wide, we were probably right on, maybe a little bit less than they had anticipated. It's all good news. Again, this slide I put before you before. We kind of moved to the second stage of this now. So we're beginning to do some reform here. We're developing long-term plans, and we're trying to get some consistency and sustainability based on the new norm, if you will, the reduced revenues that we're seeing. Here are the current economic indicators through December. The other thing I got, we actually get this from Elliot Pollock every Monday morning, his immediate release. Things are improving in Arizona. The state was 22nd in job growth in 2011 compared to 49th in 2010. So we're beginning to see some improvement. This was the best performance since 2007. Phoenix was ranked 9th in 2011 compared with 31 metro areas. And this was the best performance for the greater Phoenix area since 2006 when we were number 1 in job growth.
Just real quick, can you add, I guess, in the future in that slide, we have the state employment at 9.1, but I believe ours is what, 6.1?
6.4.
Oh, is it 6.4? Okay. But it's still lower than the state. And I guess the consumer confidence, that's statewide. I don't know if you can break it down any finer.
I don't think we can get that any finer, but if we can, we will.
Okay.
And Joel, I'll certainly be able to add that here, and it may be a month behind just because of the...
That's all right. All I know is...
Might not be consistent.
At least what I'm saying is our unemployment's doing better than Maricopa. Are we still around second for the county?
We're second in the county. Peoria is tied with us, and I forget there's one other that's better than us.
Okay.
But we're really doing very well.
Well, that's That's what I was trying to sell our earlier guest here to move them all along, but it didn't work. Didn't work.
Well, and to that the point, retail sales are doing good, and again, you saw that with the revenue
Right.
year over year.
Now, I assume when you got consumer confidence of 15, I'm no economist, but it doesn't seem to be very, very good. At what point does it have to be where, you know, things start picking up and people start spending? And I mean, what do they consider does anybody know what they consider a good number for consumer confidence?
No, but I would think would be positive.
Well, yeah, but but I mean, I'd be curious to see what that number.
I'll try to find out.
Which would be nice, because obviously that's not a good indication.
Well, what I'll share with you is we actually had one of the associates from Elliott Pollock out for our WFIOA luncheon, and he spoke there. They're actually beginning to look at different indicators, and it's quite interesting because he was saying that consumer confidence isn't holding the weight or the validity that it used to influence our forecasting. And he was talking mostly at the state level because they do the forecast for the state of Arizona. And the other thing was unemployment. They're not looking at that because those indicators are not turning around as quickly as some of the other ones.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I do have a question. I've heard a lot about like the true underemployed or unemployed rate for the state. Do we keep that for the city as well?
I can get that because it was actually part of that presentation. And what they've done, I mean, you've heard this this theme all night long about change. They're changing the way they're analyzing things. We're just changing the way that we're looking. They've actually have a figure, again, from Elliott Pollock that will state his claim was that we're overstating unemployment because there's so many people, because of the things that have changed, that are now just non-employable. So maybe, you know, a wife in the good times that went to work she's not going back to work. She's not going to be in the workforce. And some other things with legislation have also changed that. Obviously, the population of the state has changed. And so I will get you the information from that presentation. I'm not going to read these again. These are some of the assumptions that we look at when we do long-term forecast. The point here I'd like to make is between the time we looked at it in October and we came to you with what we were doing, perhaps putting together the forecast for the 5 years, we really aren't seeing any major changes, good or bad. I'm so happy to say that we're not seeing any declines in a number of prime areas. But we're also not seeing tremendous growth. We're probably averaging between 2 and 4%, and it's really consistent with what we're seeing month over month.
Real quick on this slide here, when it comes to the property tax, our total levy for 12-13 versus 11-12, the difference with all being equal, do you know what we're looking at?
I know that the valuation is estimated to go down for one more period.
But I mean, the total levy that we need to operate, I'm not so much worried about the rate, but the total levy from current to the total expected levy we're going to need for secondary, property taxes and the operation. What kind of difference are we looking at there? Do you know?
Larry does.
The total levy that we will need for this upcoming year is about $180,000 higher than what we levied this year, and that's simply because we didn't levy at 100% of our debt service. So that's the levy. That's not the rate. I think that's
No, I'm getting at the levy because to hold everything equal, if we could find a way to equaling the levy, whether it's our one-time, money that we have in our pot, and if it's 180, whatever. The point I'm getting at, I'm not so much concerned, as you know, with the rate. I'm more concerned with the levy because that's what people pay. So we're looking at about 180,000.
I think the safer way to put it, approximately the same as this year.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I could have said that. Yeah. Larry's he's a property tax expert. Okay, and moving ahead, again, we just wanted to point out that, we're continuing to update and monitor both on the expenditure side and the revenue side. We're looking at the trending for the key revenues here. We're not seeing any major changes. Revenues do appear to be up a couple percent as far as year-to-date goes, and we're anticipating carrying that through year-end. Single-family permits are definitely holding steady, as well as the development-related revenue. So in closing, where do we go from here? We will be monitoring revenues. We'll probably finalize a forecast for that. Again, once we get the major information from Lee, because that is a large percentage of the revenue that we get that comes from their estimates. We're looking at council priorities, incorporating those in, and then again, considerations from the operating departments. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions about the budget process or any of the financial information presented.
Thank you.
Just one quick one, probably for John. Will there be within the process, just refresh my memory, when we get into the council priorities, are we going to have a work session for all of us to discuss? Because we may not all have the same, focus as we kind of move in the budget. I know you're going to do the one-on-ones with the departments. That'll get us an understanding of, at least for a lot of them, on how that money's spent. But the other part of this.
Yes, we will, not only from the standpoint of the strategic plan, but the operational plan, but also from the budget standpoint. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Any other questions? We're good. Lastly, Councilmember report on current events. Just quickly to tell you that a couple of us were up in Estrella for the 303 open house, and I will say one thing that ADOT should understand. People were hoping for a presentation and not just open easels. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, sir. Gary.
That was conveyed to them the week and a half before, and obviously they haven't changed their program since I was at the Australia.
No, and that's
open
too bad.
house. But maybe they'll get the message in the future.
No, they won't.
And, don't we have Chinese New Year tomorrow?
Tomorrow afternoon, 5 o'clock?
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
Chinese
Dragon-
New Year here.
Dragon dance.
Dragon dance.
Wear
Really?
red.
Something? Oh,
Yes,
wear red. Okay.
Just real quick, I got to represent the city at the YMCA, I think if I get this right, Family Fitness Fun Fair. And we kicked it off with the YMCA, so it wasn't pretty, but it was fun.
Very good. Thank you, and we will see Mayor Lord next time. Manager's summary, anything?
Nothing this evening.
All right, thank you. Adjourned.